Hello and welcome to my very first video for ADHD Wild Women, which this channel is an offshoot of a podcast that I do. You can find the link in the comments, talking all about ADHD and womanhood and some of the, the challenges that we have as women. I wanted to start this first video though by explaining why wild women, like why. And I guess part of that involves sharing some of my own journey, because like many women who grew up in the 70s and 80s, I wasn't diagnosed with ADHD. I had all the markers of ADHD. By the time I was in my mid-teens, I had a lot of markers of what the sociologists like to call social exclusion, expelled from school, in and out of local authority care, beyond parental control, pregnant at 16, homeless, all of these things. And I struggled for so long, but nobody ever suggested to me it might be neurological. And I'm 49 now, but I wasn't diagnosed until I was nearly 43. So it took a long time. And in all of that time, it didn't occur to me that I had ADHD, not even after one of my kids was diagnosed with ADHD. I have 5 children, all of them are neurodivergent. It never occurred to me I was the genetic link, which is incredibly ADHD when you think about it. And I think that's because I grew up in a time where nobody talked about ADHD. And then when I started to learn about it in the 90s, when one of my sons was diagnosed, it was considered something that boys had, and it was considered more the hyperactive subtype. So there's a lot of discussion about this everywhere, and I don't really want to go too much into it, but I do want to talk a little bit about my diagnosis, because when I went into diagnosis, and I did do a whole episode on this, I was kind of half not believing it. It was a friend who suggested I go for diagnosis, like, if you ever considered you've got ADHD. I haven't got ADHD. I'm like the most ADHD person ever. But I was half expecting it not to be that. And I was also half expecting, well, it might be that, and then my whole life is going to be saved. And neither of those things happened. What happened was I went into the typical grief cycle, which I'd actually studied at degree level, so I should have known what it was, but I was just so in it that I didn't realise. So first of all, it was denial, and I wasn't going to accept that I had a disability. I was in absolute denial. Then came anger, a lot of anger. Why wasn't this picked up earlier? Because like a lot of adults with ADHD were diagnosed later on, I had all the markers of what they call low achievement or underachieving. I'd spent most of my adult life in menial, low-paid jobs. But then I'd have these periods of insane stamina and insane overachieving. So I get myself through university between the ages of 28 and 31 as a single parent. I graduate with a first class honours degree in social sciences. I go back to cleaning because I can't deal with it. And before I even entertained the notion I might have ADHD, to me, it was like, I was always looking for that one planner or that one thing that was going to fix everything. It was going to fix my life. I was just going to get a diary or a system, and everything was going to be fixed and I was going to be able to function. But the problem was I couldn't function in certain ways. After the anger of why didn't anybody notice, I was furious, came grief, because the grief for all of the lost time. And after that came acceptance. Acceptance initially was a compromise though, and I guess this is the overall theme of this video, is it was a compromise, because the only way I could accept my ADHD was on the terms of it being a quote-unquote superpower. Now, there are aspects of ADHD that do feel like a superpower. There are things that we can do that neurotypicals can't. So I'm not going to undermine that. And actually finding the whole superpower narrative really helped me break through a lot of my own, internalized ableism. Like, I just didn't want to accept that I had a disability. Absolutely did not want to accept that. And I would have considered myself somebody who was totally okay with disability. Okay, I'm like totally, but not when it happened to me. It really freaked me out. And I guess it's shameful in a way to admit that, but if we feel that we're one thing our whole lives and suddenly we're not, it can be a shock. So I got onto the bandwagon of hacking my ADHD. And this isn't to disparage any channel or to put down that sort of advice. I think it's useful. It has a lot of use for us as people with ADHD. I have learned so much about my ADHD through this kind of hacking system, but it is very productivity based and it is very much about hack your ADHD. So with this channel and my podcast, I'm not here to tell you how to hack your ADHD, because you can't hack your ADHD. This isn't to sound defeatist. We are our ADHD. This is a different operating system. It can't be hacked. We can manage certain aspects of it with medication if we choose to do that, but it's not something that's going to go away. And I think being honest and open about this, sometimes it's a superpower, but it's not a superpower when I can't get in the shower, when I can't cook for myself, when I can't get out of bed, when I can't get somewhere on time, when I've got work piling up and I just can't get through it because I'm so paralyzed by overwhelm. That doesn't feel much like a superpower. And I do think that we have a culture now, a social media culture, a narrative about ADHD. It's like all the quirky, cool, fun things about ADHD and let's hack the rest. And I really think that we need a space to have more balanced and adult conversations about ADHD, because it's not that black and white. I do feel like if somebody came and said, I'm going to take your ADHD away tomorrow, I would say no, because I don't know where I begin and my ADHD ends and vice versa. I don't know who I would be without ADHD. And I wouldn't want to find out, because I'm at a place now where it's like, okay, I have a different operating system and that presents certain challenges in a neurotypical capitalistic world that revolves on certain rules. Okay, I get that. But I think in being honest and open about our strengths and our challenges, that's where we can find a place of acceptance. And I feel like this productivity narrative really what it did with me, I'm talking from personal experience, but it encouraged a lot more masking. And really key to real, authentic self-acceptance was to take off that mask and to really lean into what my ADHD was. And over the period of the last several years, that's the personal journey that I've been on. It's been a spiritual journey. It's been a lot of therapy journey. But one thing that I started to notice was, as women with ADHD, our core natures are kind of incongruous with traditional femininity. And so this is where the wild part comes in, because under the patriarchy, that wild part of us is stamped out. Us as a collective, all women, not just women with ADHD. But as women with ADHD, we have a particular challenge in masking these more wilder aspects. In a lot of cases, we can't do it. And that is the behaviour that's then deemed problematic, that needs to be managed. And I don't agree with that. I think we need to lean into that. Because as women with ADHD, we're not quiet, we're not passive, we're argumentative, we're passionate, we're sensual. We're either too much or too little, or never enough, or too much of everything. And so for me, that whole idea of acceptance is come to mean accepting my wild nature. And of course, to be the wild woman is to be on the wrong side. And the very first episode of my podcast, I used Clarissa Pinkola Estes' Women Who Run with the Wolves as a core for this whole sort of mission, because she talks about the rewilding, not in the ADHD sense, but for all women. And so that's why the wild, because I don't think we need to hack our ADHD. We are our ADHD. Why do we want to fit in? I think a lot of our unique gifts come from this wildness that we have, that we find very hard to control, but why do we need to control it? Why don't we just come to a place where we have an acceptance of that? Because a lot of that, it comes from these more patriarchal values, these more traditional values. And I grew up through my life thinking I was a right-on feminist, I was a punk rocker, I was into heavy metal. But these last several years, past 40, I believed I was this absolute rebel. The amount of stuff that I dragged up that showed how hard I masked, how hard I actually tried to live outwardly what looked like quote unquote normal heteronormative life as a wife and a mother at certain periods. I was still brainwashed by that and breaking away. What is me and what is society? These narratives that they put in our heads about all of this stuff and how we as women with ADHD are wrong. That's what I want to examine with this channel, with the podcast. And so if you like what you've seen, subscribe, like the video, let me know if you relate, and I will be back with another video next week, all about apologising, which is something I rarely do now.